Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and we're going to be looking at 10 players that the Las Vegas Raiders could potentially trade for this offseason. Pete Carroll, Spytek, Tom Brady. It's going to be an aggressive offseason, no doubt about it. Now, this is important to note. The Raiders can't go out right now and make a trade at the time that I'm making this video. Any deal that ends up getting done can only be made when the new league year starts, March 12th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. There is a legal tampering period, which is 48 hours before that time, and if you hear any smoke, any rumors around any trade that might end up going down, it can't officially become official until that new league year starts. Here's one promise that I got for you, though. If the Raiders trade away a player, if the Raiders end up trading for a guy, I will be live here on this channel. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on, because some of the craziest shows that we have ever done are when the Raiders have gone out and made some big-time splash trades. If you want to check out a video where I break down the top 10 players most likely the Raiders could trade away, this video is going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description of today's show. So this is important to note. The players I'm going to be talking about coming up here on today's program, 5 players on offense, 5 players on defense, but all 10 of these players, there has at least been a report in regards to either A, that player is asked to be traded, B, the team could potentially move on from him. I'm not just picking dudes out of the air and just throwing them in a video. All 10 of these players, there is a chance that those teams move on from those players. So it's not just the craziest names out there. I try to find realistic names for the Las Vegas Raiders. Let's go to the first one here. We're going to start on the offensive side of the football first because, well, I think there's a lot of fun names here. DK Metcalf, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Final year of his contract, and that's going to be a very common theme that you're going to see. Usually when players are in the final year of their deal, and maybe it's a new regime, maybe the current regime doesn't want to pay them even more money, and maybe they're looking for some money, so then that's when you see a team potentially move on from somebody like DK Metcalf. He's got a phenomenal relationship, which is not a secret, with Pete Carroll. And honestly, I've said this before. If the Raiders trade for DK Metcalf, I'm doing that entire show without a shirt on. If you don't know why, well, then you need to look up DK Metcalf, Pete Carroll, no shirt. If traded, this is going to cost the Raiders $18 million in 2025. But here's the thing. The only way the Seahawks are going to trade Metcalf, and the only way Metcalf's going to want to come here to the Las Vegas Raiders is if you give him a brand new deal. He's 28 years old. He's 6'4". He's a giant person, and I actually think it almost fit perfectly for what this organization's trying to do. Go out, get yourself a field stretcher, somebody that knows Pete Carroll extremely well, somebody that's also not afraid to go out there and block and just loves football. DK Metcalf, if you tell me right now, Mitch, who's the number 1 receiver you want the Raiders to bring in this offseason, free agency or via trade, it's going to be DK Metcalf based on the price tag, based on his relationship with Pete Carroll. And if you want the silver and black to get this guy in silver and black, I want you to hit that like button right now. I'll tell you this. Jacoby Myers, DK Metcalf, Brock Bowers. Come on, you got a little bit excited me saying that. Let's go to another name here, and it's also from the Seattle Seahawks. It's Geno Smith. And a lot of these names, I'm not saying that every single one of these players I would make the trade for, but they are names that have been linked to the Raiders in some sort of fashion. Smith is in the final year of his contract with $0 million guaranteed, and Pete Carroll was the one that almost like recreated Smith's career. He was really bad before he met Pete and has been a pretty solid quarterback since then. If traded, it's going to cost the Raiders $14.8 million in 2025, and this would likely mean that they're going to have to go out and get a brand new deal done. So if you're the Raiders, and let's say you don't like the deal that Sam Darnold might get, or you're not loving Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, whatever your other quarterback option is, could you potentially go out, trade for Geno Smith? It's not going to cost you all that money, and then you'd probably have to go ahead and give him another year, maybe 2 years on a deal. I know Smith's coming off a year where he threw for 21 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and it is still a little bit of a coin flip, if you will, of whether or not the Raiders should do it or won't do it. But this will be somebody that will be continuously linked to Pete Carroll, because before Smith was a member of the Seattle Seahawks, which you can see back in 2021, nobody would have ever thought that this would be a quarterback that you would give a contract 3 years, $100 million to. And based on that fact and based on that relationship, if they're looking for a bridge quarterback and none of the other QBs maybe in free agency want to be bridges, I think Geno Smith would take that opportunity. But you know what? Smith isn't the only quarterback, and he's not even the biggest quarterback name on this video. If it was up to me, the number 1 name that I would look at to potentially trading for is Matthew Stafford. I say that, but also, if you haven't seen the latest report, and I'll be very transparent, I am making this video on February 19th, and there was a report that came out today that if the Rams were to move on from Stafford, they would want a first-round pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. The reason why they want a first-round pick, because if the Rams trade Stafford, it's going to cost them $45.3 million in dead cap space. It's going to save them only $4.3. So if you're the Rams, you go, do I want to pay Matthew Stafford $45 million to not be on my team? Or do I want to pay him $49 million to be on my team? So you can understand them trying to get a first-round pick. Here's the thing, though, for the Raiders, if you make that deal, if you make the trade, it only costs you $23 million this year, which is a really good value. In 2026, it's $53.6 million with zero guaranteed. I'm telling you this right now, if the Raiders were to make a trade for Stafford, Stafford's going to be this team's quarterback for 3 years guaranteed because of the extra money that they would have to put on his deal. And when you listen to a lot of the people that are close to Stafford, if he goes to a new team, he wants a brand new contract. So don't look at these numbers and think, wow, we're going to be able to get Matthew Stafford for that. You might get Stafford for that 1 year, but then you're also going to tie yourself to Matthew Stafford, who's got a lot of arm issues at 36 years old for many years down the road. So if the Rams are saying we want a first-round pick, it's no secret this organization needs a quarterback, and I'm going to be somebody that's always going to ask the questions, whether it upsets you or whether it doesn't, because at the end of the day, if this show ruins your day, you got to find a better life, and I mean that in the most nice way possible. So please, let me know down below who wins this trade. If you think it's the Las Vegas Raiders, type Raiders. If you think it's the Rams, type Rams. My answer is going to be right here after this YouTube ad break. This is a clear win for the Los Angeles Rams, and quite frankly, I just don't think it's all that close. I want Matthew Stafford on this team, and I would offer the second-round pick that we have at pick 37 just simply because I'm not going to give up a first round next year, and I'm not going to give up a first-round pick this season. Stafford is a good QB, and if you put Stafford with Pete Carroll in this organization with also the amount of money that we have, salary cap, draft picks, like you would be able to build a playoff-caliber team in year one. But I'm not just trying to build a playoff caliber team. The only way that it would make sense to trade for Stafford is if you think that you can win a Super Bowl. If you're looking at your roster and if you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you go, I don't think we're going to be able to win a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford, then I would just say that you don't do it and you keep on looking. Let's go to another player here on the offensive line. It's Trevor Penning, offensive tackle of the New Orleans Saints. This one scares the absolute bejesus out of me. But sometimes I wonder, and maybe it's just because, let's be honest, that's a creepy smile. But when I think about why upside and why would I go this route, he was a former first-round pick. He's in the final year of his deal, and the Saints are like $47 million in cap hell. Like, they're 47 in the negative. The Raiders, at the time I'm making this video, are somewhere around $100 million. He is a solid run blocker. You can't deny that. He is a liability, though, in the passing game. At 6'7", 320-something pounds, he's a really big dude, and you can tell that he's struggling a little bit coming in there from northern Iowa. 17 games played, 5 sacks allowed. The question would be, do you think that Trevor Penning is better or an upgrade over DJ Glaze? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. If it was up to me, I'd kind of rather just roll with Glaze. Trevor Penning, though, maybe you find him on the back end of a deal. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. You'd probably give up a 7th-round pick at this point for New Orleans. Let's go to another offensive lineman, and this one's going to be Evan Neal. And I would rather the Raiders go out and trade for Evan Neal than going out and trading for Trevor Penning. Now, Penning can be a right tackle. Evan Neal is basically a right tackle as well. But call me crazy, I would switch Neal to offensive guard, and I would kind of take the route that you saw the Philadelphia Eagles do with Mekhi Becton, who was an offensive tackle coming out of Louisville, and he's just a really big dude. Evan Neal is a monster human being who was drafted in round 1, and this was a player, I believe he was taken like number 7 overall for the Giants. I thought this was a lock to be one of the best offensive linemen in the league, and he's just struggled. Jermaine Illuminor has outperformed him. I forget the other tackle's name. Andrew Thomas, I believe, for the Giants has outperformed him. But if traded, it's only going to cost the Raiders $1.1 million. Sounds like he wants a new beginning as well in New York. I'll admit, if you make this deal, you might then have to go ahead and give him an extra little bit of bump in pay and whatnot. But at 6'7", 340 pounds, I want the Raiders to be physical. And if it was up to me and you told me right now I could put Evan Neal at offensive guard, that's what I would do it. I'm not going to trade for Evan Neal to put him at a tackle because he just doesn't have the footwork and he's a little bit too slow to be able to handle some of those speed rushers that are coming off the edge. But sometimes you got to look at yourself in the mirror as a man. I think Evan Neal's got to look at himself in the mirror and go, you know what? I'm not a great offensive tackle. Can I recreate my career? Can I be a better offensive guard? And if he is open to that idea, I think you'd be crazy not to consider bringing in the Alabama product that was a top 10 prospect at one time. Coming up next here on the show, we're going to look at some Raiders trade targets on the defensive side of the football. You got to be able to win in the trenches. There's some really good names that I'm going to be bringing in, and there's one team especially that is in a full fire sale mode, and we're going to be looking at a lot of those guys. Before we break all that down for you, reminder, we got to always try to show you guys the products that we're pushing here on the Raiders Report. And if anybody needs themselves a new Raiders hat, go to chatsports.com/Raiders hats. I've had a lot of people ask me, Mitch, how do I get one of your Raiders Report hats? How do I get a Chat Sports hat? The only way you get one of those hats is if you pull up to a live show. Maybe it was my birthday show. Maybe it's another live show on Tuesday, and you got to get a little bit rowdy. I'm not going to lie. Chatsports.com/Raiders hats, though, whether it's a trucker hat, whether it's a snapback, flat bill, whatever you're looking for, we got hundreds and hundreds of hats available. Chatsports.com/Raiders hats. That link's down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Let's go to the defensive side of the football. First name I'm going to bring up here is Martin Emerson, cornerback for the Cleveland Browns. He was a third-round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, and another player that's in that final year of his deal. And let's face it, Cleveland, they need all the draft picks, and they need all the cap space, and that's what happens when you play with the devil. Deshaun Watson, I'm not surprised that you end up in hell. If traded, it's going to cost the Raiders $3.5 million in 2025, and this could also be an opportunity where they might have to give him a new deal. I'll be frank with you. This isn't going to be somebody where I trade for and then try to give them a new deal. I'm not interested in that. If I am going to go that route, we're going to talk about another cornerback here in just a moment. But 80 tackles, 5 PBUs. If you're Las Vegas and you're looking there and you're going, all right, we're going to move on from Jack Jones. I need another reliable player that probably fits what we're trying to do, and he does fit with this team. Athletic corners, and that's what this organization is going to look for. Athletic corner, 6'2", 200 pounds. Martin Emerson could be a little bit of a cheaper route. If you're the Raiders and you go, you know what, we just got a little bit of bump in salary cap space. We got a lot of draft picks to play with, and I love a good yard sale where you might be able to buy something at a little bit of a cheap discount. And Greg Newsome is a legit corner. I'll admit he's coming off probably the worst year of his young career, but playing in Cleveland and that whole situation last season, sometimes you got to look at the entire picture, and there was a lot of very unmotivated players for Cleveland. In the final year of that deal, very talented player. I absolutely love this kid when he was first coming out of Northwestern, and he was one of my top cornerback prospects in that draft. Now, if you trade for him, it's going to cost you $13.4 million in 2025, but here's the thing. When you trade for a player that was drafted in round 1 or very high up in the draft for that matter, you're going to have to pay him, and they will end up having to pay him. My point is, if you were Las Vegas and you're sitting there going, well, no matter what, I was going to potentially sign let's say a DJ Reed, a Byron Murphy, one of these other top, prospects in free agency, or you could trade for Greg Newsome, get him at $13 million, because I think if he was on the open market, this is going to be a corner that's going to get $16, $17 million at least. And knowing that, yes, he's coming off a bad year, but you look at his previous seasons and he can get it done. Greg Newsome, Ja'Cory Bennett, that's a really fun and young cornerback duo, because I believe Newsome's only like 25, 26 years old. Let's go to the big man on the defensive tackle spot, Mazi Smith. And I'm not a big fan of Mazi Smith. I'm not going to get it twisted. And when you turn on the tape, there's not a lot to get excited about. But this is a young man who's got 2 years left on his current contract, and I just don't think that the Dallas regime did him any favors. The only reason why Mazi Smith is even on this list is because you can get him for cheap. He was a first-round pick, I want to say 27th overall just 2 years ago, but I believe in Rob Leonard. I believe in Patrick Graham. I believe in our Raiders defensive staff. And when you look at a lot of the pieces that this Raiders team already has on the defensive line, we got a lot of good run stoppers. I need somebody that can get after the quarterback, and if you don't get the opportunity to bring back Adam Butler, I could make the argument a cheap option to go out and look for, because if you trade him, it's $2 million this year, and then $2.6 million with zero guaranteed in 2026, so even technically, you could make that trade, and then you could technically move on from him the following season. He's a humongous human being in the middle at 6'3", 337 pounds, and I want to build in the trenches. And you put that guy next to a Christian Wilkins, next to a Max Crosby, next to a Tyree Wilson, and he's going to learn. He's going to learn with Rob Leonard. He's going to learn with Patrick Graham. And just imagine if Mazi Smith looks like the Mazi Smith that you saw at Michigan and not the Mazi Smith for the Dallas Cowboys. There are certain organizations that are bad, and right now the Dallas Cowboys are one of those bad organizations. Shit, I wouldn't mind taking advantage of Jerry Jones. So what I want you guys to do real quick here is name a player that the Raiders should trade for this offseason. There's a lot of names out there, right? Like I keep getting asked, Mitch, are the Raiders going to trade for Tyreek Hill? I would say no to that because of the Fred Bilenikoff rule. If you don't know what it is, please, I take your time. Make sure you go out and Google it. But the Raiders will make some moves this offseason. I don't know how many big splashes they're going to do, but there's a lot of names out there this offseason. Let's go to the next player here. It's going to be Jaycee Horn, another cornerback to look at. And everything that I said about Greg Newsome kind of sticks the exact same way here with Jaycee Horn. He is in the final year of his deal with the Carolina Panthers, and he's coming off the best year of his young career, but he missed 31 games in 4 seasons. He's had a lot of injury concerns. He did play 15 games, though, last season. If traded, it's going to cost the Raiders $12.5 million in 2025, and because he was, I want to say, like the number 8, he was definitely a top 10 pick for Carolina. Because of that, you're going to have to pay him then if you go out and trade for him. But again, if you're the Raiders and you're looking at no matter what cornerback we bring in, we're going to bring that guy in to have for the next 3, 4, 5 years, time to Pete Carroll, John Spytek. I think if you're willing to roll the dice a little bit, you go with a player like Jaycee Horn because he's got the talent to be one of the better corners in the NFL. And if I was Jaycee Horn, a player who, funny enough, I'm serious, and I can go back and I can look at the notes, was a normal comp or a common comp when he was first coming out from South Carolina to Richard Sherman. If there's one player that I don't know Jaycee Horn's agent. If I'm Jaycee Horn's agent, I go, do you want to go play for Pete Carroll and try to be the next Richard Sherman? That sounds pretty enticing to me. The final name here on the list, it's the biggest one out of them all. It is Myles Garrett. I will say that there is a 1% chance that Myles Garrett gets traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. I also said there was 1% chance that Luka would ever get traded. I've also said there was a 1% chance that the Raiders trade for Devontae Adams. Proof, anything can happen in the National Football League. Myles Garrett and Max Crosby are really good friends. And funny enough, Garrett has been linked to the Raiders. And I roll my eyes to that because it doesn't really make any sense for the Raiders to go out and trade for Myles simply because they would have to pay Myles Garrett, let's say, $35 million a year, and then they would also have to pay Max Crosby $35 million a year. You know, it's a lot of allocated money on your edges. But at 27 years old, 29, I mean, dude, you're locked and loaded to have one of the best defensive lines in the entire National Football League. And I make the argument, if you go out and get Myles and you go out and get Max, obviously you already have Max, you're going to be able to bring 4 and always get pressure. That is a proven way to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And if you can beat the Chiefs, you are a Super Bowl caliber team. Now, Garrett is an absolute dog. He's an absolute monster. I'm really intrigued to see where he goes. The problem with this, though, realistically, is how much it's going to cost you. And it's probably going to cost you 2 first-round picks. And I've already said, I'm not going to give up 2 first-round picks. I'm not going to give up my first-round pick this year, and I don't even really want to give up my first-round pick next year, just in case the Raiders are unable to land that quarterback of the future, and then you have to look at more QBs in 2026. Myles Garrett is an unbelievable talent. He's maybe the best player in the NFL when you just look at the position he plays, and y'all know how much I love Max Crosby. But Myles Garrett is an absolute animal, and the fact that he's already been looking to be traded, I don't know, man. Had to throw him on the list here. So one more time, here are the 10 players that I think the Raiders could potentially target in a trade. 5 on the left or on offense, 5 on the right or on defense. I'm not saying that I would go out and make the move for any of these players, but sometimes the way that you get a trade done is you got to be on the trade block, and I do believe all 10 of these players are at least on the block right now.